and that hit me like that, rockets you back in your seat, and it takes your breath away. I mean, it's just like a numbness comes over you, and then a sadness. The impact that a diagnosis of breast cancer has upon the spouse has been underappreciated. Hi, my name is Alan Kramer. I'm a medical oncologist in San Francisco, and over the past 25 years, I've seen many breast cancer patients and their spouses. But in 2002, my wife, Pat, was diagnosed with breast cancer, and although she had relatively early stage disease, I knew that she would require chemotherapy, radiation, and hormonal therapy. I clearly was not prepared to deal with her diagnosis, treatment, or follow-up. I needed help. The following documentary addresses how I found that help, as well as a few of the many areas that one can be helped with their wife's breast cancer. But this documentary is not about me. It's about thousands of men who will be told that their wives have breast cancer this year, or worse, will lose their lives to breast cancer. So please stay with me over the next hour, and maybe some of the areas in which we highlight will be helpful to you.
It's very important to learn to live with pain because it's going to be your friend for a while.
When I first met Jen and Victor, I was standing right outside of my exam room, and I heard this laughter coming from the both of them. And I thought that this was odd. She was coming to hear about her prognosis and treatment, yet they were laughing.
I mean, when she first went to the doctor, I was not in denial, but I wanted to be in a state of disbelief. I wasn't going to believe what was happening to her. It was because I didn't want it to happen to her. You know, we were outside of St. Francis. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, and she was looking at her x-rays from the mammogram. And we found out that she had cancer.
I think when we first found out that I actually did have breast cancer, it was freaking us out a lot. And there was at one point we were waiting for some results from the biopsy, and we were just waiting and waiting, and it looked like we were thinking the worst.
Yeah.
We thought, oh my God, it was taking so long, and so then we thought, okay, this is it, I'm gonna die. That's all we could think. And so then, and I had some friends visiting from out of town, and everyone was worried. I went to bed, I was real upset, and so we're still waiting for Dr. Newman to call us to let us know. And so then we started playing a game. We were playing some kind of game, like the four of us, a board game. I don't know what you said. We said something about cancer. I don't know. But anyway, it's become the kind of joke around the house. Like Victor came home the other day. He had a splinter in his arm, and he's like, oh, my arm really hurts. And then I bust out my arm with all my track marks from chemo. And so then we laughed about that stuff. I don't know what we laugh about. We laugh about his hair. We laugh about my no hair. We laugh about, I don't know, we laugh about everything. We laugh about other people that we make fun of in a nice way, you know?
I mean, maybe some of your patients have odd names, like Larry Smiley. So.
Yeah, yeah.
Larry Smiley.
Yeah. So stuff like that.
Oh
yeah, that's our thing. So now we have a whole character named Larry Smiley, even though we've never met him. So if we go like this, who am I? It's Larry Smiley. So it's just weird stuff that we make up.
It helps us to alleviate those times when they are tough, you know, right after she's very tired, but it's just helps buy you a little time of relaxation to be able to still enjoy each other, because if you can't laugh, then it just makes the whole issue of it being very serious and can be very mundane, and and it could be drawn out and make you feel very low, and just you feel helpless that way. This way, it helps you move on from where you're at, and knowing that you're going to be healed, knowing that you can accept with what you have now, and know that when you do get better, you can really just move on from there and just, you know, grow with your life. It's at least somewhat enjoyable, and it's not such a, you know what I mean? It's not,
Well, it's
but,
true
yeah.
because even though, like, let's say, God forbid, I shouldn't get better, then should the last time of my life be awful and totally depressing? So you might as well have a little bit of fun because you don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
That's good, right?
We needed to find someone who was expertise in laughter during a crisis. Many years earlier, I had seen Linda Richmond at a breast cancer conference, and I was much impressed with her story.
My cousin Barbara is one of the great loves of my life. We speak every morning. 8 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings, it's cousin Barbara. 7 years ago, I was living in Tucson, Arizona, and that phone call ensued. And she also said to me, I found a lump on my breast. And I said, well, go to the doctor and, you know, see what the doctor says. And in 48 hours, my cousin was told that she needed a double mastectomy. And she made her arrangements. She picked her doctor. And we all went to the hospital with her in the morning. And we all kissed her goodbye. And then my sister and I and a whole bunch of other people went to the waiting room. And it was a 14-hour surgery because she had a double mastectomy and immediate reconstruction, and they had to take muscle from her back to build up her breasts. And I went over to her bed and I put the sheet over her and I said to her, Barbara, your boobies are gorgeous, but I gotta tell you something. You look like crap. You should have opted for a facelift. And after 14 hours of surgery, I heard, and I knew she'd be all right. Because if you can laugh after 14 hours of surgery, you're gonna be all right.
Although I've seen many gay and lesbian patients over the years, I rarely get a chance to interview their partners. One of my bravest patients, Laura Buckley, with metastatic breast cancer, endured much in terms of treatment. I wanted to interview Laura and her partner, Lars, to see how well they were coping with breast cancer and the treatment. What I found out had some surprises for me.
In those moments of getting the results back from the biopsy, it was like, okay, you know, like, it just seemed like, oh, it's back.
Well, my family isn't here, really. My mom was here all this summer, and Lars's family has always been very welcoming to me, to us, and I've never really felt anything different in the fact that we're gay. And then, you know, her family, I love the fact that she's close with her family, and it brings a lot to me because I didn't necessarily have that growing up, and I've always been drawn to people whose families are very important to them.
That's how I've grown up, is, you know, Sundays spent with grandparents and, you know, parents and sometimes cousins, and I derive a lot of, I wouldn't say strength, but it's definitely something that enriches my soul more. And it's part of my church, I guess, is the kitchen and being with family.
It's some of the best times that we have with her family, and then that kind of feeling that we bring into our home of just, I think that's what bonds us, is being able to come together over a meal. And
well, I mean, you know, the coming out process is a very interesting process for many people, and everybody has different stories, but it just, you know, I've always, you know, felt tremendous love, you know, from my family, and you know, I just feel really supportive and always felt support from them. And I never felt, even in like those people talk about dark times and lonely times, but I always feel not like I would never feel abandoned. I don't know. I mean, that must be such a scary feeling, but you know, I always feel like they will always be there, and it's a very safe feeling.
To comment on the impact that breast cancer has on a lesbian relationship, I contacted Sandra Butler, a counselor for both gay and lesbian couples. Sandra lost her partner to breast cancer several years ago and wrote a book entitled Cancer and Two Voices. I found the book very compelling, and I was interested to hear Sandra's remarks about how breast cancer impacts a lesbian relationship.
I think it's really important at the time of a diagnosis and during treatment that a couple not fold in on themselves, whether they're lesbians or heterosexual. I think it's a time to let in as much light and as many people as constitute your family. And for a lot of us, family is chosen. For a lot of us, family is biological. For some of us, it's a combination and overlap of both. But the important thing is that family is constituted with the people who can support you, take care of you, give you strength, give you a break, give you courage if that's what you need, and invite everybody who is helpful forward, and people who are going to undermine and not be useful. This is not the time in your life to make rapprochement with them.
Our group is not unique because there are other groups like this in the country, but there are damn few of them. Most men are afraid to say, I can't fix it, I can't control this, I can't make it right.
I'm sitting here at Denny's. Denny's very similar to where the group called Man to Man meet on a regular basis to talk about their wives' breast cancer. We went out to the Marin Breast Cancer Center, and I was struck by the men's openness and camaraderie.
This group started roughly 12 years ago, somewhere 11 to 12 years ago. We can't really pin it down exactly, but, and it's just some place where you can bring up whatever is concerning you or a question that you might have, and know it's contained within the group and not going elsewhere, and you're talking to people who have probably been where you're headed, and experienced what you're afraid of.
I guess it was about 6 or 8 months ago. And my wife was, I think it was just before she took chemo. She had had the mastectomy and came home with a little flyer. She said, you should do this thing. And I never joined something like this. And after a while, I felt that I was a little bit alienated in what was going on. And so I took a chance and I came here. And I think the thing that was most interesting about the experience, and it still remains, is I had a lot of questions. I, in a way, didn't want to know. I mean, I love my wife. I can't see her being hurt or anything like that. But I kind of avoided it for a little while. I kind of smiled with her, but underneath it, things were going on. And I had lots of questions, like I said. And coming to the group, I've had a lot of my questions answered. And it's been supportive in that kind of way for me.
I think one of the bigger benefits of this group goes beyond the clinical stuff, because you get inundated with all the the numbers and the percentages and all of that kind of stuff. But what you don't get are the little things of how it's going to affect your life, how some friends are going to really be there for you, ones you never thought would, and your real close friends are going to suddenly shrink back because they can't deal with it. And there's so many aspects of what goes on through the treatment and beyond, and the down that comes when the treatment ends, and all the attention goes away, and those things that there's no source of information on that will come from someone who's been through it.
I came way late. My wife was through chemo, through everything. The first person I ever knew that passed away of cancer was Mary Bowersock, who happened to be Bill's, the founder of this organization's sister. And when my wife first mentioned this group, I recognized the name, and you know, I don't join things, so everything was all right. I didn't need to do this. And then a little later, another friend of mine had a recurrence of skin cancer and died. And I couldn't deal with that. So I grabbed a little flyer and I came to my first group. Talked to Bill, talked to Marv, I think Woody was there too. And I had questions as to how long this lasted, because like I say, it was probably 6 months after my wife Jill had completed her chemo. She had double mastectomy and chemo. And I was very diligent for a long time, and then kind of dropped out, and I pop back in periodically when I need some help. But this is 10 years, and you know, there's still occasions when I've got something I want to talk about, or I just want to see how everybody's doing. And it's helped me because it allowed me to realize that I was not in one of these things alone, that everybody else was going through basically the same thing I was or had gone through. I felt good in that when someone new came in, I could share some experiences and maybe warn them that you know, what to kind of look out for, because we had all experienced it. And it was, you know, it's not like every case is the same, but there's certain patterns, I believe, that follow along. You know, the hair comes out when you're having chemo, the feeling of losing the femininity, and all of this other stuff that we as loving spouses have to deal with and have to support and encourage, that's not impacting us when, yeah, it is.
Something occurred to me just now when you were talking, that the women, for the most part, are self-absorbed. That's not a negative thing, it's just a reality. And the men, therefore, are sort of on the periphery of what's going on at all times. And the group acts as a catalyst to allow us to voice everything we want about what's going on. And things that we don't get to express to our wives. I found that for the first time in a long, long marriage, that there were things I couldn't talk to her about. And in the group, I can talk about that sort of thing. And fears are one of them. I would not express my fears all the time to my wife, because that would freak her out. She had enough problems of her own going on.
You've kind of brought up one of the major benefits of this group right here, is that there's a natural aversion for most men, and I'm certainly guilty of it, I don't need no stinking support group kind of thing. And it's more than just emotional support, it's information. My background is technical. I'm an information kind of person. I'm not particularly emotional. It was a big step for me to join this group originally, because I got dragged in kicking and screaming. But there's so much of these side issues that will never come up outside of a group like this. You don't even know the questions to ask. There are things that will come out like, oh, that's interesting. It's nice to know that this is going to happen ahead of time and not get smacked on the side of the head by it when it does.
It's very interesting. I think that, and again, I haven't thought of this before, but perhaps all of us who had to overcome our initial resistance to the group got into the group because of the love of our wives. And
I wanted an expert to comment about how the man-to-man support group could impact an individual's ability to cope with his wife's breast cancer. So we traveled to Palo Alto, California to seek the expertise of Dr. David Spiegel.
One of the things that you could see in this group is these guys like talking to each other because they realized that their own particular reactions, while they weren't identical, weren't so weird either. That, you know, many people feel guilty. Why do I feel this bad? Why am I this anxious or sad or whatever it is? And then you're around with a bunch of other guys who seem like normal, confident, nice guys, and they're having very similar feelings, and it begins to dawn on you that it's about the situation. It isn't about you're not handling it well. The second thing is competence. One of the things that we've discovered in these groups is that people start to feel like experts in living. They've learned things to do. They've learned tricks that help them and their wives cope better with the illness. And so they go from feeling overwhelmed and incompetent to saying, not only have I learned how to help my wife with this, but now I can help these guys help their wives. So I've learned something that is a kind of gift to them, and something genuinely good has come out of a bad situation. And I've learned something about dealing with cancer that will help others as well. And I think one way to view what goes on in the man-to-man group is that they're sticking their toe in the water. They're saying, seeing what it feels like to be a little more open and honest about their emotions, and hopefully trying it out among the other men in the group. They can try it out at home as well. And while, sure, there are times when you don't want to burden a wife. You know, she's exhausted, she hasn't slept, she's just gotten her last round of chemotherapy. You know, none of us are very good at dealing with anything when we're physically fatigued and emotionally exhausted and haven't slept. So I'd pick a time when you're not likely to be interrupted and you've gotten a good night's sleep and you can deal with things. But another way to think of it is, are you adding a burden, or are you actually helping your wife to lead a more normal life, in the sense that we tend to sort of infantilize cancer patients. You know, we make, oh, you poor dear, I won't bother you with anything else. In fact, one of my patients, I remember, screamed at her husband because he was cooking dinner, she was in bed, she was very weak, and their daughter, who was like 11, was heading to the bedroom to have mommy help with her math homework. And Daddy said, well, don't bother Mommy, I'll deal with it. And she just screamed. She said, I can't cook, I can't clean, I can barely walk, but I can help Julie with her homework. You know, she wanted some normal area in her life. And one way to think of it is that when you're more open with your wife about how bad you're feeling, you're letting her act like a wife again, not a patient. You know, so she can now comfort you rather than always be the one who is comforted. And that actually, in a way, is a kind of respect. It's addressing a strength, not a weakness. I think it was very touching to watch these men talk so openly about their problems. It was clear that they liked and cared about one another, that they found it a constructive process. I mean, none of them were there because they had to be. They were there because they wanted to be. And it's not something that men do instinctively. You know, women will tend to do it more when they get together for coffee or go swimming or, you know, in the kitchen. Men tend to talk about baseball scores and stuff like that, and it's harder for men to get to the point where they can have those kinds of discussions. And so I think finding a situation where they were encouraged to do it, where they were able to and wanted to do it, is a really nice thing to see. And I think it's very helpful. I think it's a little harder for men, but they need it more because it's not going to happen spontaneously in their lives very easily. So, you know, it was just clear that they felt they had created something special and that they were really helping one another and benefiting from doing it. That was evident from just watching them talk. And that, you know, they were exploring unknown territory and they were helping one another do it. And that was a nice thing to see.
In retrospect, what you see is that you go through a continuum. When you first hear the diagnosis, it's like the wind is taken out of you. When Pat goes and gets mammograms, I get nervous, and if I don't hear from her right away, I figure that something is not right. Usually, you know, she has a mammogram, calls me up and says everything's cool, fine. But here I didn't get a call, and I said, man, I don't feel comfortable here. So I called the radiologist, and the radiologist said, there is like a new spiculated mass on the mammogram. You know, and that like, you know, hit me like that, like, you know, rockets you back in your seat, and you know, takes your breath away. I mean, it's just like a numbness comes over you. And then a sadness happens. And then you start, you know, with me, like I start projecting, you know, what this means and the biopsies and treatment and what that all is going to mean. So, because, you know, I already have gone through this with other patients. Visual imagery and meditation are techniques that I have not practiced. So when a cousin recommended a book called The Power of Now, I had some skepticism. Nevertheless, the book really taught me how to cope with my wife's breast cancer. Applying some of the techniques from the book, I was able to form a wedge or a space between myself and the noise that was in my brain that was feeding my stress. You know, I said, well, you know, gee, I need some help. So I looked at this book, I started to read the book, and I said, geez, it makes a lot of sense to me, you know, what they're saying here. Whether or not I could apply this to myself, I didn't know. But I read it with an open mind, and what it entails is you have to be an observer of your own thoughts. So that you first have to recognize that you have a problem, you know, that you're going through some difficulty, pain, anxiety, what have you. You have to, you know, then, you know, grab hold of yourself and be an independent observer of those thoughts. So once you do that, once you can do that, then you're taking control of your emotions, okay? And that's the start. So and then the second element is what I did is I found a quiet place, and you know, I would just look at a tree and really study the tree, you know, and it put me right at the present time. And I would, you know, I notice every branch, every leaf, you know, I really like studied this thing. And you know, I completely blocked out any future thoughts or any negative thoughts. And at the end of it, at the end of the process, what I found is it restored some degree of tranquility for me. So I said, wow, you know, this, you know, there may be something to this stuff, you know, here, you know. And the more crisis that I felt, and the more I started to drift back and think about the future and start projecting, the more I said, whoa, you know, I got to grab hold of myself again. I have to be the observer of my thoughts, you know, which I did. And I got to go into the present. And I would frequently look at a picture of my dog. And I was like a laser beam, you know, and I would just focus on that, and it just pulled me back. I mean, you know, so it was very helpful to me, and who was somebody who was very skeptical, you know, of this.
I mean, because I knew he was having a hard time, you know, not jumping ahead, not saying, where are we going to be in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? What's going to happen? And I've known him for so long that I know that's what he has a tendency to do. And then when he read the book and he, you know, was starting to actively work on it, I mean, I did notice a difference. It did seem like he was just a little, you know, better able to just cope in general. His mood was better. We could joke around, and he could, you know, be very supportive. I mean, and he was very supportive. I mean, through everything. But it was almost like a burden had been lifted a little bit, because instead of worrying about what's going to happen down the road, he could just deal with right now. And if we were sitting watching television or just enjoying each other's company or watching a funny movie, he could enjoy it without being preoccupied with what's going to happen. And it just seemed to relax him, and I think it seemed to help him take the whole treatment period and going through it a little more day by day rather than projecting and being sort of panicked and really distressed by things he normally would have been.
I think the more crises you go through, the more you utilize this technique and the more you stay present, I think the better off you are. I mean, you could deal with the present. You could deal with the right now, because right now you're here, and you could deal with that. So it gets more difficult to say what is going to be a month from now or 2 months from now or 6 months or a year or what have you. That's where it gets more difficult. So, but I learned that you shouldn't go there. You're not, that's a place you shouldn't be. You should be, really focused right now, in the present.
Last year, I have a chance to really experience what life is about, and all my life experience, all my training, and how I can put into practices.
To comment about the power of meditation, I turned to Segu Chopal Rinpoche, a Tibetan Buddhist monk. I met the Rinpoche several years ago when he was diagnosed with head and neck cancer. The Rinpoche has a profound understanding of the power of meditation and how it can help both physical and emotional stress.
I'm not sad. I'm in pain. I am in a discomfortable position, but it's one aspect of my life I have to face right now. I really have to deal with that. And that became the focus of my daily life, my meditation per se. And just put my mind into that position. And that put me in such a peace of mind, very strong, because I was able to keep myself right in the moment, every single breath. And because I make 2 great decisions into this process, as I was told, perhaps I will have to have a tube to feed me due to my oral cancer, and the amount of pain would be also unbearable. And I decided to not put the tube because I will push myself to eat. And in order to eat, I have to control the pain. And I decided also not to have painkiller. And the only way to do that was to be really peaceful and focus what I need to do it. So, and I just took me sometimes an hour just concentrating in how I want to drink my gluey insure. And then slowly I was able to exercise my taking in and controlling evidently the pain. So how I did that, one of the things I visualizing in not only the moment, but understanding the body, yes, having the pain, but if I had the separation, the mind from the body at that moment, so put my mind in such a peaceful place and not to be nervous, not to be thinking ahead, not to be afraid about death and so forth, by living to the moment. So by doing this, I was able to really to concentrate myself in that moment, in the moment. Like I mentioned before, the pain itself, how to be in the moment, in relation to the pain, how we focus about pain. First is to identify, that's what I call, in my case, the techniques I use, it's my own self-reflection and think about it. I take the pain and try to find out where is the eye of the pain. where is the pain hurt the most? And then I focus my attention to that point. Then as I find out the pain, the source of the pain, which is the eye of the pain, and then as I'm concentrating into it, I try to relax my body all together. For instance, if I have pain, it's very common. We have pain in our tooth, then we try to tie up all our muscles from the face, right? And because of the self-reaction about that. So the same, if I have pain here, then I start to contract myself all together because I try to squeeze the pain or alleviate the pain, but then I make it even worse because the tendency, we try to contract ourselves all together. So by finding myself the eye of that pain with my throat, and then from that I try to relax the surroundings, the mass of my neck, my shoulder, make sure my shoulder is loose, my neck is loose, small movements and so forth, and experience, and then really even go with the pulsation of the pain as well, because the pain pulses, have its own life. So as you go into that rhythm, and then your mind, when you concentrate into it, and then slowly, you only located you have been located that eye, the pulse of the eye, and then start to irradiate it, that being disappearing out in the surrounding. As much as you can, you try to eliminate the center, but the focus is not to eliminate the center, it's to control the center and relax the surrounding. In relationship to the emotional pain, then the emotional pain, I suggest for people around me, and when they get nervous and tired and tight and feel, sad and so forth, say, well, no, focus in your heart. Just visualize, I pick it up a blue color. The reason the blue color, because blue is a little peaceful, brings some kind of serenity, just a matter of have something to relate it with. Then I think the blue is the most neutral things you can visualize. It's not a shape, it's not a figure, it's not a concept, but just one shade, just one focus. Then you try to focus. As you concentrate into it, if you'll be able to, now I get the how they call it, the blue. Then with that blue, I have a thought like a peace, harmony, tranquility, love, and balance, equilibrium. So I try to, not the concept of being peace, I wish I could be in peace. No, I'm feeling peace. Why I'm not feeling peace now? I can be in peace now. Oh, I'm not in peace because I'm tired. I'm tight. Relax.
One of the areas that touched the nerve in the man-to-man support group was the impact that breast cancer had upon the couple's sexual relationship. They were not prepared emotionally to deal with the impact that had upon their sexual relations.
Overnight menopause is something that is not addressed by the doctors or the literature.
The research that I've seen, looking specifically at women with breast cancer, the rates of sexual dysfunction at some point, either during treatment or post-treatment, is anywhere from 50 up to 64%. And that's the best estimate that we have right now. But
talking about sex brings to mind my anger with the medical profession because they didn't address it at all. They didn't address a lot of things. They addressed the fact that my wife had a life-threatening disease, and that was the focus, and it was very narrow, it was tunnel vision. Side effects were minimal on the drugs or anything else, with the exception of nausea pills for the chemo. And sex just never even came up once. And suddenly we found that we had some real problems. Her libido disappeared. I mean, basically disappeared completely. There was vaginal dryness that they hadn't warned us about. There was vaginal cracking. There were all sorts of things that caused pain from intercourse. That wasn't discussed. We weren't even given a hint that that might happen. And so we were both very angry about that.
So I work with women who are anywhere from being newly diagnosed to being long-term survivors, and there are different issues that pop up at each stage of treatment, certainly. The main concerns are body image concerns. So after surgery, they're embarrassed by their scars, they don't want to be naked in front of their partners, and so that's an obvious hindrance to sexual functioning. And then with the hormonal treatments, it's all the menopausal sexual side effects that they're dealing with. So it's vaginal dryness, decrease in libido, difficulty with orgasm comes up for a lot of women as well. And then there are all the psychological aspects that feed into sexual functioning as well. So if they're depressed, if they're anxious, if they're struggling with sort of existential issues, that's going to have a huge impact on their sexuality as well, their level of desire. So we really have to look at sexuality as being very multidimensional and realize that all these other things feed into it, the quality of the relationship, the other life circumstances that are going on. When people are under stress at work, they find that their libido becomes diminished because of that. Financial issues, and all these things are sort of exacerbated with a diagnosis of cancer. I think what works for couples is if they can maintain some sort of sexual interaction throughout all those stages of treatment. And really what it takes to do that is we have to sort of broaden our definition of what sex is. Sex is not only intercourse. Sex can be sensual activities as well. So if couples can maintain those sensual activities, hugging, kissing, massaging, cuddling, all of those things, that sort of builds a foundation that you can build off of. Once you get through all the treatment, once you get through the sort of intense emotions around being diagnosed with cancer, going through the treatment, if you keep sort of if you keep the burner going, it's easier to turn up the flame once that immediate need is taken care of and you're off into survivorship. But if you turn off the pilot light, it's much more difficult to heat that up afterwards.
The point is this: we humans, yes, we do have energy, and a lot of that energy we express in several ways. But one very profound experience of that energy is our sexuality. But if we learn how to extend that energy in other modalities, we should not ever lose that intimacy.
It's almost a mind-body approach to sexuality. So it's what do we think about what it is that we're doing, and how does that affect our behavior? And the flip side of that is a more embodied approach. How do the signals that our body sends us inform how we think and feel about our sexuality? So it kind of works in both directions.
So the fulfillment of it is as good or even better than the other. Because the other, yeah, we have it is, but become a little so mechanical when we finish the ups of the climax of the sexual interaction, then we collapse in energy. But as we get used to it, like I said, hugging and sharing and caring and nurture from the heart, that stays for hours.
So as an example, sensate focus is something that is very successful, especially working with the body image issues, because certainly after mastectomy there's altered sensation, there's numbness, it could be actually painful. And so how do we take a part of the body that used to be a really important part of sexuality and sex play and say, well, we no longer can interact with it the same way that we did. We need to sensitize other areas of the body. We need to focus on what we do have as opposed to what is missing post-surgery. So using sensate focus exercises is one thing that we do in sex therapy as a sexologist I do all the time. Really getting people to focus in on what it is that I'm feeling, what are the sensations that are coming up, how do I sort of enhance the pleasurable sensations that I'm doing.
We are closer, more intimate now than we ever were because of the necessity to adjust. So in some ways it was beneficial, just as cancer in some ways is a very bizarre blessing. It makes you learn a lot of things and deal with life a lot differently.
Well, the point is that you don't want to forego sexuality for 5 years, because that's going to make it really difficult at the end of those 5 years to try to regain it. And I think what happens a lot of times with women is, you know, they kind of have the ability to turn sexuality on and off, more so than men do. And for a lot of women, they may feel like, oh, I don't have any desire, I don't have any libido. The question isn't necessarily, do you feel like having sex right now, but are you open to getting into the mood to have sex? And so communication is key there. I mean, we really need to start having these discussions about sexuality in an open, sort of adult, mature manner, as opposed to kind of snickering and giggling about it and making it a taboo subject. So the more that we can communicate about our sexual needs, desires, wants, our likes, our dislikes, that again builds a platform that you can sort of grow from.
The biggest thing, and it got worse as the disease progressed, was that it takes over your life. I mean, it took over her life.
One of the most frequent comments that I hear as an oncologist, how do I deal with all this death and dying? To be honest, I get a lot of gratification out of taking care of the terminally ill patient and helping relieve some of the pain that they're going through or experiencing. But what a spouse goes through, that's difficult. For this segment, I contact my colleague, Dr. James Garrick, to talk a little bit about how he endured his wife's terminal illness.
So she was biopsied and then underwent surgery, and she had the breast removed, and she had her nodes removed, and they were all positive. And I think she'd obviously done some reading about this, but not a lot, and I knew, and I think she did, that this was not the greatest prognosis in the world with all positive nodes. But except at the very end when she got really sick, I think it impacted us as little as it did because of her attitude. I mean, she wasn't going to let it happen. Then I think she tried to let that influence her life as little as she could. I mean, there was still, every test and every visit and every time they took the fluid out and whatnot, it certainly impacted on her because it would take a day, and if she had something planned, she couldn't do it, and she knew she couldn't do anything the next day, and the interminable waiting and so on. And so I think then we couldn't ignore it anymore, and it was obviously getting worse and worse and worse, and because more things were happening that we had to deal with. And but again, I mean, she chugged right along. She did not, there was never any soul searching, and
the person who has an illness like advancing cancer in a way sets the tone or the pace for how they and their loved ones deal with the illness. And as you heard, her approach was to kind of be upbeat about it, to really look away from the darker side of what was happening, and she pretty much refused to discuss it.
I think if I were to give anybody advice, was that she didn't want to talk about this. I mean, she knew she had a really serious illness, and that was probably going to kill her. But she didn't want to talk about this, and I would start, not often enough, I dare say, but I would mention things, and she would usually answer with a sentence or so, but she was not the type of person who was going to dwell on this and who wanted to talk about it. And I think now in retrospect, I should have pushed it harder, and we should have talked about these things. Because, I mean, we really didn't talk about her dying until almost the day that she died.
On the one hand, one has to respect that the person who is ill, you know, is the only one who can really decide how and how much they will deal with what their illness means when they're dying. At the same time, I think it's important to remember that in a couple like that, there are two people involved, and they both have problems, rights, and responsibilities.
So all of a sudden, I mean, she isn't there. And there was all this stuff that she had been kind of trying to tell me about, like you can't take care of the house because you don't know how, and here I am having to pay the bills and figure out how to keep from getting overdrawn and take care of the house and be around for the kids, who were both pretty tough about the whole thing too. And so it was a big shock, and I think it would have been less so maybe if we'd talked more about it.
I think there are a number of ways that a dying patient can be very helpful to their loved ones. I think just talking about what they mean to one another. You know, after someone has died, and you know, I ask patients watching this movie to think about the losses they've suffered in their own lives, and think about special moments they had with a loved one who is now gone, and what that meant to them, how that sustains them. That when they were told how much they loved them, you know, what it meant. If you can think about what you have taken from other people in your life who have died, think about giving that to your loved ones. What do you want them to always remember about you? What do you want them to know about how you feel for them? And you know, it puts you back in control. This isn't giving up, it's not giving in. We're all going to die someday. It's controlling those aspects of it you can control, and there are better and worse ways to die. And to be prepared and to help prepare your loved ones for it is a better way to die. It's a way of helping them and being a vital, active person right until the end of your life.
So that's it from me. Thanks for joining us this past hour. Go out and have a laugh. Call a family member. Form a support group. Hug your wife. Meditate. Communicate. Slow down time. I'd like to leave you with this poem written by Joe Meloche, who talks about his wife's breast cancer. So why is a scar on a man a mark of distinction, on a woman a mark of disfigurement? I don't know. Why is it funny when a man loses his hair and tragic when a woman loses hers? I don't know. What will you tell her when the x-rays turn the scar on her breast raw, hamburger red? I don't know. When she's bald, lost the hair from her eyebrows, and lies with closed eyes with a skeletal look, will you kiss her and tell her she's beautiful? I don't know. What do you do in the bedroom when she's thinking of death and she cries? I hold her hand and I breathe. The song a robin sings through years of endless springs, the murmur of a brook at eventide that ripples by a nook where two lovers hide. A great symphonic theme, that Stella by starlight, and not a dream. My heart and I agree, she's everything on earth to me. The song a robin sings through years of endless